In the heart of the African mountains, nestled between ancient peaks and forgotten valleys, lay the small village of Makena. It was here that Dr. Samuel had built his reputation as a miracle worker. His clinic, a modest stone building with whitewashed walls, was always filled with the sick and desperate. On this particular morning, the waiting room buzzed with quiet conversations and hopeful whispers. Mrs. Henderson, a 70-year-old woman bent with arthritis, sat clutching her walking stick. Her joints ached terribly, and she had traveled from 3 villages away after hearing stories of Dr. Samuel's incredible cures. "Don't worry, Mrs. Henderson," Dr. Samuel said, his voice warm and reassuring as he handed her a small brown bottle. "This medicine will have you back on your feet in 2 days. I guarantee it." Mrs. Henderson looked at the bottle suspiciously. The liquid inside was dark and thick, with an unusual sweet smell. "Doctor," she said hesitantly, "can it really heal that fast? I've suffered for 20 years. Dr. Samuel's eyes twinkled with confidence. "Trust me, dear woman. This is my special formula. You won't find anything like it even in the city hospitals. I've spent years perfecting this recipe, combining ancient herbs with modern medicine." Mrs. Henderson unscrewed the cap and drank the bitter liquid. Within moments, something extraordinary happened. The pain that had tormented her for decades began to fade. Her stiff joints loosened, and for the first time in years, she could move her fingers without wincing. "My God!" she exclaimed, tears streaming down her weathered face. "The pain is gone already. Doctor, you truly are blessed by the heavens." Dr. Samuel smiled with satisfaction, watching as Mrs. Henderson stood up straighter than she had in years. "See? I told you it works miracles. Come back in 2 days and I'll give you another dose to complete the healing." Word of Mrs. Henderson's instant recovery spread through the village like wildfire. Soon, people came from neighboring communities, carrying their sick relatives on their backs, desperate for Dr. Samuel's miracle cure. And without fail, every patient experienced the same incredible instant relief. But miracles, as we shall see, often come with a price that isn't revealed until it's too late. 3 months had passed since Dr. Samuel's miracle cures began transforming the village. Michael, a 28-year-old teacher who had recently arrived from the city to educate the village children, began to notice something troubling. Michael was an observant man trained to question and analyze. As he taught his students each day, he couldn't help but notice the strange patterns emerging in their community. One afternoon, Michael approached Dr. Samuel's clinic with growing concern. The waiting room was fuller than ever, but these weren't new patients seeking healing. These were the same faces had seen months ago, people who should have been cured by now. "Doctor," Michael said, entering the consultation room where Dr. Samuel was preparing another batch of his special medicine. "I've noticed something strange. The villagers keep getting sick and only your medicine seems to work." Dr. Samuel's friendly demeanor shifted slightly, his muscles tensing. "That's my skill, young man," he replied curtly. "You didn't study medicine, did you? You wouldn't understand the complexities of healing." Michael pressed on, his teacher's instinct telling him something was wrong. "But doctor, everyone, including my own father, comes here every 2 days now. It's like they're addicted to something. They can't seem to function without your medicine." Dr. Samuel's voice turned harsh. "Nonsense. People want to get better, that's all. Would you rather they suffer in pain? I'm helping these people live normal lives." "But they're never fully cured," Michael persisted. "They always need more medicine. My father was walking perfectly after his first dose 3 months ago, but now he says he can't even get out of bed without your treatment. That doesn't sound like healing to me." Dr. Samuel stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Young man, I think you should stick to teaching children their letters and leave medicine to the professionals. These people trust me because I deliver results." As Michael left the clinic that day, a cold dread settled in his stomach. Something was terribly wrong in his village and he was determined to find out what. That night, as the village slept peacefully under a blanket of stars, Michael couldn't rest. The questions plagued his mind like persistent mosquitoes. Why did everyone need constant treatment? Why was Dr. Samuel the only doctor who could help them? And why did the patients seem to get worse when they missed even a single dose? At the stroke of midnight, Michael made a decision that would change everything. He slipped out of his small house and made his way through the dark streets to Dr. Samuel's clinic. The building stood silent and imposing in the moonlight, its windows dark like dead eyes. Using skills he'd learned as a curious child, Michael picked the simple lock on the back door and entered the clinic. His heart pounded as he navigated through the familiar waiting room, now eerily quiet without its usual crowd of patients. In the storage room, Michael found rows upon rows of brown bottles, all filled with the same dark liquid that had become the village's salvation, and he suspected its curse. He unscrewed one of the bottles and inhaled deeply. "What is this?" he whispered to himself. The bottles had a strange, sweet smell that reminded him of something. But what? It was familiar yet disturbing, like a half-remembered nightmare. Michael carefully poured a small sample into an empty container he'd brought with him. He would take this to the city laboratory where his cousin worked. If there was something wrong with Dr. Samuel's medicine, the analysis would reveal it. 3 days later, Michael's phone rang while he was teaching his morning class. It was his cousin from the city laboratory, and the man's voice was shaking with shock. "Michael," the lab technician said, his words tumbling over each other in urgency. "This is terrible. The medicine you brought me. It contains high amounts of opium derivatives. This isn't medicine, it's a drug that makes people addicted. Whoever is giving this to people is essentially dealing narcotics disguised as healthcare." Michael felt the blood drain from his face. His worst fears had been confirmed. "So, Dr. Samuel is turning the village into drug addicts?" "That's exactly what he's doing," his cousin replied grimly. "And the most evil part is that he's disguising it as healing. These people think they're getting better, but they're actually becoming dependent on drugs. When they don't take it, they experience withdrawal symptoms that feel like their original illness returning, but worse." Michael hung up the phone with trembling hands. The children in his classroom stared at him with concern, sensing their teacher's distress. But Michael's mind was racing with the horrible implications of what had discovered. Dr. Samuel wasn't a healer. He was a predator, feeding off the desperation and pain of innocent people. And now Michael had to figure out how to expose this monster without putting himself and the entire village in danger. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, as if the sky itself sensed the storm that was about to break over the village. Michael had spent the entire night planning his approach. He knew that confronting Dr. Samuel directly was dangerous, but he couldn't let this continue for another day. Michael entered Dr. Samuel's office with the lab report hidden in his jacket pocket. The doctor was sitting behind his desk, counting money, more money than a village doctor should reasonably have. When he saw Michael, his expression immediately became guarded. "Back again, young teacher?" Dr. Samuel asked, his voice deceptively casual. "I thought we'd settled your concerns yesterday." Michael closed the door behind him and locked it. "I know what you're doing," he said, his voice shaking with anger and fear. "These medicines are drugs. You're not healing people, you're addicting them." Dr. Samuel's face went pale, then flushed red with panic. He stood up quickly, knocking over his chair. "You can't prove anything. No one will believe you. I'm a respected doctor in this community. People are suffering," Michael continued, pulling out the lab report, "and you're profiting from their pain. You've made them addicted to keep them as permanent customers. You're not a doctor. You're a drug dealer wearing a white coat." Dr. Samuel's mask of respectability finally slipped completely. "I heal them," he shouted desperately. "Without me they'd be in agony. I take away their pain. You create the agony." Michael shot back. "You give them temporary relief with drugs, then when the drugs wear off, withdrawal makes them feel sicker than they ever were before. They think their original condition is returning, but it's actually drug withdrawal." Dr. Samuel lunged toward his desk drawer, but Michael was quicker. "Don't even think about it," Michael warned. "I've already made copies of this report and sent them to authorities in the city. Your game is over." The doctor collapsed back into his chair, his hands shaking. "You don't understand," he whispered. "I needed the money. Medical school debt. My family. I never meant for it to go this far." "How far?" Michael demanded. "How long have you been doing this?" 5 years, Dr. Samuel admitted, his voice barely audible. "It started with just a few patients who couldn't afford real treatment. I thought if I could make them feel better temporarily, it would buy time until they could get proper care. But then I realized, they kept coming back. And paying." Michael felt sick to his stomach. 5 years of systematic poisoning, 5 years of turning desperate people into unwitting addicts. Do you have any idea what you've done to these people? To their families? By evening, word had spread that Michael was calling for a village meeting in the central square. The entire community gathered under the ancient baobab tree where important decisions had been made for generations. Dr. Samuel arrived last, looking haggard and defeated, but still hoping to maintain his deception. The villagers looked confused and concerned. These were people who trusted Dr. Samuel with their lives, who saw him as their savior. Many of them were already beginning to feel the early symptoms of withdrawal, though they didn't understand what was happening to them. Michael stood in the center of the crowd, holding the lab report that would shatter their world. His hands trembled as he began to speak. "Friends, neighbors," he began, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "I have discovered something terrible that affects every family in our village. Dr. Samuel isn't healing you. He's poisoning you with addictive substances." The crowd erupted in angry shouts. "Lies," called out one villager. "He saved my life," shouted another. The mood was turning hostile, and Michael realized he was in real danger. "Please listen to me," Michael pleaded, raising the lab report above his head. "Look at yourselves. You can't go 2 days without his medicine. That's not healing, that's addiction. When did any of you last feel truly well without taking his treatment?" A murmur of uncertainty rippled through the crowd. People began looking at each other with dawning realization. Mrs. Henderson, who had been one of Dr. Samuel's first success stories, stepped forward. "Wait," she said slowly, her voice filled with growing horror. "I do feel terrible when I don't take the medicine. And it's getting worse each time. Yesterday I missed 1 dose and felt like I was dying." Dr. Samuel, seeing his world crumbling, made one last desperate attempt to maintain control. "Don't listen to him," he shouted. "I've dedicated my life to helping you. This young man is trying to destroy the only hope you have." But Michael was ready. He held up the official laboratory report, its government seal clearly visible even in the fading light. "This proves it," he announced. "His miracle cure contains opium, the same drug that destroys lives in the cities. He's been dealing drugs disguised as medicine, and we've all been his victims." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, the awful truth began to sink in. People started connecting the dots: the constant need for treatment, the way they felt sick when they missed doses, the gradual increase in how much medicine they needed to feel normal. One by one, the villagers began to understand that their trusted healer had betrayed them in the most fundamental way possible. The police arrived just after dawn, summoned by Michael's phone call to the authorities in the city. As they placed handcuffs on Dr. Samuel, the man who had once been revered as a miracle worker looked small and pathetic. "I helped you," Dr. Samuel cried out as he was led away. "I took away your pain. Without me you'll all suffer." Michael stepped forward, addressing the crowd of villagers who watched in stunned silence. "Real healing doesn't create dependency," he said firmly. "It sets you free. What Dr. Samuel did to us wasn't healing, it was enslavement." Mrs. Henderson, tears streaming down her face, voiced what everyone was thinking. "How will we get better now? We're all addicted, aren't we?" Michael's heart broke for these innocent people who had been victimized by someone they trusted completely. "It will be hard," he admitted honestly. "But there's a real doctor coming from the city, someone who specializes in helping people recover from addiction. He'll help you heal properly without creating new dependencies." The weeks that followed were the most difficult the village had ever experienced. The withdrawal symptoms were brutal, and many people felt sicker than they had before Dr. Samuel arrived. But gradually, with proper medical care and support from each other, the community began to heal. Some villagers never fully recovered from the damage done to their bodies and minds. Others struggled with trust issues that lasted for years. But they were free from the cycle of dependence that had controlled their lives. Michael remained in the village, helping coordinate the recovery efforts and ensuring that when a new doctor finally arrived, the community would be prepared to ask the right questions and demand transparency. Dr. Samuel was sentenced to 15 years in prison for medical fraud, drug dealing, and endangering public health. During his trial, it was revealed that he had done the same thing to 3 other villages before coming to McKenna. Hundreds of people had been victims of his scheme.